Hello, welcome to PC Jack. The message of today's video is, ask and you shall receive. And today, we certainly have. After much demand, Fractal Design have now brought out slimmed down versions of the original Fractal Torrent from last year. And today, we'll be taking a look at one of those cases with the Torrent Compact. This case is closest to the original, but with a few changes in order to actually reduce the footprint compared to the original. The overall look remains largely the same, with the really unique front panel design which allowed for an excessive amount of airflow throughout the case. This is what helped make the Torrent a chart-topping case with its excellent airflow performance, and it's nice to see that that has been passed down to the Torrent Compact as well. Now, another feature that really helped with its airflow was the inclusion of two 180mm by 36mm fans, and I have to say, these things are absolutely huge in person. Now, 180mm fans aren't really that popular compared to other case fans like 120mm and 140mm, and generally if manufacturers do go for a larger fan, they generally skip past this and go for something like 200mm, like the Cooler Master half case. So it's interesting to see that Fractal Design decided to use these with the Torrent, and it's nice that they've come back for the Torrent Compact. Additionally, I am testing the non-RGB version, but you can get a model version with an actual Prisma RGB fan as well. Either way, in terms of other fan support, you can also use 320mm fans in the front, 3 in the bottom, or 1 in the rear. Or instead, you can use two 140mm fans in the front and 2 in the bottom. But you can't fit a 140mm fan in the rear like you can with the original Torrent. Either way, this is a highly airflow optimized case with a really interesting positive pressure setup. Due to the support for a bottom mounted intake, Fractal have been pretty generous with enough clearance beneath the case in order to make sure there's no restricted airflow. So if you go for this configuration, then you shouldn't have any restricted airflow whatsoever beneath the case. While I'm getting pretty tired of cases that take a great amount of force to actually pull the front panel off, and in doing so it feels like you're ripping the case a new one, with the Fractal Torrent it's such an easy removal. It takes very little force and you simply pull the front panel back and then it comes out no problems whatsoever. And then this allows you to access the attached dust filter and remove for cleaning. And then with the front panel removed, you can then access the bottom dust filter which spans the entirety of the bottom of the case. Now, in order to actually install 120mm or 140mm fans, Fractal have included adapters so that you can actually install it depending on which one you want to go for. The case also has custom water cooling in mind with an easily accessible fill port at the top of the case. So while this case is massively optimized for positive pressure airflow, the reason you can't really go for as much of a negative pressure setup is due to the fact that this system has a top mounted PSU shroud. Now, I actually really quite like this design, and the shroud itself hides all the ugliness you would have from your cables. And in order to make the shroud look even nicer, Fractal have also included a ARGB strip along the side of the shroud. Now, in order to actually access the power supply shroud, you simply slide back the top panel and lift up, and then I'll let you get access to where you put your power supply. Now, the one thing you may notice is that the actual top panel doesn't have any ventilation for your power supply. And the reason for this is that you're expected to mount the fan on the bottom of the power supply shroud, meaning that you're intaking air from within the case and exhausting out the back of the power supply. Now, it's typically recommended that you would usually have your power supply draw air in from the outside of your case, but power supplies don't generally get that hot, and with the amount of airflow going through the Torrent Compact, it shouldn't have any problem on your system whatsoever. It's also pretty cool to actually be able to access your power supply so quickly, so it's really useful if you want to change any cables or stuff like that. Also located in the power supply shroud is a 3.5-inch drive bay. While 3.5-inch mechanical drives are kind of going the way of the dinosaur, it's still good to see that Fractal have included at least one for people who still use a mechanical drive for mass storage, and given the fact that games are so large nowadays, it's kind of expected that you would use one at this point. Besides the one 3.5-inch drive bay, you also get 3 2.5-inch drive bays as well for your 2.5-inch SSDs or even mechanical drives. Now, it's going to seem quite ignorant of me, but upon unboxing the case, I saw that there was the usual tempered glass side panel on the side you would usually expect, but I didn't actually know that there was a tempered glass side panel on the back of the case as well. Either way, this is a really interesting feature, but it does mean that you are going to have to be particularly careful with your cable management, as it will be on show. This isn't actually as much of a concern though with the dark tinted tempered glass, because it does actually cover up the cables quite well. I do have a slight gripe with this though, and that's the fact that the motherboard's 24-pin cable was bulging out ever so slightly, even though I tried to manage it to the best of my ability, meaning that it was pressing up against the glass when I tried to close it. Now, if you do have a bit of cable bundling that you can't actually press down too much, you can screw the panel into place, but obviously you are going to have to be careful as you are putting pressure on tempered glass. Thankfully, it wasn't a massive amount of pressure I had on my side panel, but even still, it'd be useful if you could flatten your cables as much as possible, or even use flat PSU cables in order to negate any pressure against the side panel. And maybe if Fractal gave another 2 to 4 mil of space behind the motherboard tray, this could have helped even more. On a side note, if you do decide to go for the dark tinted tempered glass version, then you may want to have some illumination inside the case, like RGB fans or LED strips, because if you don't have any in there at all, you basically cannot see any of your components. So if you are that way inclined, you may have to have a think about that. Or instead, you can go for the regular non-tinted tempered glass version. In terms of cable management though, Fractal Design have been pretty generous with the amount of rubber grommets available to choose from for your bulkier cables. There's a cutout on the bottom left of the motherboard tray which allows you to pass through your cables like your HD audio cable, but I did find it a little bit tight if you want to pass any other cables through. Additionally, where you would usually have your front panel connectors pop through from a cutout, there is only the actual rubber grommet to the side of the motherboard, meaning that your cables are going to be quite visible from that area. And even more so if you have any cables that go into the lower middle part of your motherboard, like your USB 2.0 for example. This also means that you need to make sure that your cables aren't dangling too closely if you've got any bottom mounted fans, as they could get caught in the fan blades. So you could stop this by managing the cables as best as possible, or instead getting fan grills for your bottom mounted fans. On the back of the motherboard tray, Fractal included plenty of Velcro straps in order to tie down your cables, and also some cable routing options that actually will help with keeping your cables nice and tidy. I think throughout my entire build I only actually used one zip tie, and that was for a bunch of smaller cables that couldn't actually fit anywhere else, which is really good news. Even on the outside of the case, Fractal have been generous with having Velcro straps on the outside if you have your PSU cable drifting down, so you can actually bunch it back to the case in order to reduce the cable clutter on the back of the system. In terms of connectivity, we have a headphone and microphone jack, along with two USB 3.0 ports and a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port. All in all, for motherboards, this case supports eATX, ATX, Micro ATX, and Mini ITX motherboards. Regarding CPU cooler support, the Torrent Compact supports coolers up to 174mm in height, and when it comes to graphics cards, supports a length of up to 330mm. Lastly, as you may be aware, the original Torrent was recalled when there was actually an issue with the Nexus 9P Slim fan hub, and thankfully that was resolved very quickly and they actually did do an updated version of this. And I'm happy to say that Fractal have included this with the Torrent Compact as noted by the version 1.1 on the actual hub itself. Moving on to thermals, I've tested this case using my dedicated test system which features a Core i5-12600K along with an EVGA RTX 3060 Ti Gaming XC. Both components have been configured specifically for today's testing, but also to be repeatable on future cases, which will allow me to include much more comparative data on my future case reviews. For a full breakdown on my case testing methodology, make sure to check out the video description for all the details. For today's testing, we're using noise normalized thermals with the Torrent stock configuration with two 180mm fans in the front. It's worth noting that all tests have been run over a 20-minute duration in order to fully reach equilibrium in terms of temperatures. Starting with our idle temperatures, our CPU averaged 31C while our GPU averaged around 27.4C. And then putting a sustained multi-core workload on the CPU saw our 12600K average hit 73C, which is pretty respectable while drawing around 150 watts. Putting a sustained synthetic load on our GPU then saw our average temperatures hit 71C. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with these results, considering the fact that we don't even have any exhaust fans installed in the case. But I would still advise using an exhaust, as it will still add to the thermals and increase performance. But in addition to testing the stock configuration, in order to actually compare better against cases in the future, I've decided to use standardized case fan testing with two 140mm Corsair fans in the front and 120mm fan in the rear for exhaust. And this should allow us to better compare against other cases even if they have different configurations at stock. So these fans will be used in all case testing moving forward in order to provide reliable and accurate data. This isn't the most optimal fan configuration, but it does provide us with a positive pressure configuration which a lot of cases can utilize. So again, starting with our idle temperatures, our CPU averaged around 30C while our GPU averaged 26.8C. For our CPU underload, we saw an average of 71C and our GPU underload averaged 71.8C. Now it's worth noting that while both fan configurations have been tested at 40 dBA noise normalized, the Corsair fans are actually running at 90% fan speed, while the Fractal Design's 180mm fans are running at 60%. Now obviously, due to the larger size of the fans, this will allow them to push more air through at lower speeds, but you could even improve this even more with other intakes in the bottom as well. But it's really impressive with the actual stock performance as is, without even adding any other fans to the configuration. So overall, I'm really impressed with this case. I was a big fan, pun not intended, of the original Torrent when it first launched, and its younger brother actually ticks all the same boxes that I would have with the previous case. While it's great that the overall look has managed to translate fairly well to this more compact version, I'm also glad that the airflow performance has also been passed down as well. There are drawbacks, like I said, with less cable management space behind the motherboard tray, and the fact that you can't actually use a 180mm fan in the bottom of the case if you're using an ATX motherboard. But overall, these are compromises I think you should be willing to make if you want to go for a more compact case like this. Coming in at £139 for this non-RGB version, this case is probably more comparable to something like Corsair's X1000D series, and you should get similar performance, but obviously the Torrent Compact will have the added benefit of bottom-mounted intakes as well to improve performance. Either way, I am really impressed with this case, and while this is the first entry in our case testing hierarchy, the Torrent Compact has surely set a precedent that a lot of cases will struggle to follow in future. So, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, then please feel free to like and subscribe for more videos on the way soon. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of the Torrent Compact. I am actually planning to move my main system into this case, so I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. If you're after more PC Jack content though, then make sure to check out my Twitch channel where I live stream every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PCJack94. If you'd like to talk more with myself, another like-minded hardware enthusiast, then make sure to check out the PC Jack Discord. If you'd like to support the channel even further though, then make sure to check out the PC Jack Patreon where you can claim exclusive benefits while helping to fund everything I do on the channel for you guys. You can find links to all those in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.